Hey folks, we're about to start another episode of Ask Us Anything about electrochemistry. But before we begin, because we have some extra time, there are a few things I'd like to go over first. While we're waiting for the live stream to start, type your question into the chat. The sooner we get your question, the sooner we'll be able to answer it when the live stream starts. We usually try to answer questions in the order that we receive them, but it's definitely possible that we get so many questions that when your question comes up, we're out of time. If you are a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 YouTube member, you do get priority in us answering your question. You also have the opportunity to join us on the stream to either share slides or talk to us in person about your specific electrochemistry research questions. If you are a Tier 1 or Tier 2 member on our YouTube channel, you will find in the community post the link and password to join us on our broadcasting platform. We get a lot of questions about electrochemistry, whether it's through our YouTube comments, webinars, email, phone conversations. We get lots of questions from people about electrochemistry. And sometimes responding to a YouTube comment or trying to describe a cyclic voltammogram over the phone isn't always the easiest way to teach or describe electrochemistry. That's why we created this live stream. In the Ask Us Anything About Electrochemistry live stream, you can ask us any questions you have about electrochemistry, and we can use better tools and take more time to describe some of these electrochemical processes to help you with your research and understanding of electrochemistry. Now, in our time of doing this live stream, we've observed that if you ask a very, very specific question, we might not be able to answer it. It'll be a little bit too specific for us. On the other side, if you ask a very broad question and you're interested in just a very broad understanding of cyclic voltammetry, we have separate tools, we have other resources to help you. So we do have a YouTube video on cyclic voltammetry, an introduction to the subject. And if you're interested in more of a long-form course on, say, electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, we have a 5-part EIS webinar series for our Tier 2 YouTube members that you can access at any time. Now, if you weren't aware, Pine Research Instrumentation is a company that produces a wide array of high-quality electrochemical research equipment, from potentiostats to electrodes, electrochemical rotators, cells, different types of accessories. Pine Research has been supporting electrochemistry research and teaching for decades. Recently, we have developed new electrochemical simulation software called Aftermath Live. Aftermath Live is an online streaming platform where you can simulate popular electrochemical techniques like cyclic voltammetry. It's a powerful research tool, as you might simulate a cyclic voltammogram to support an electrochemical mechanism for your redox reaction that you're studying. But Aftermath Live and cyclic voltammetry simulation is also a very powerful tool when it comes to just learning electrochemistry. In fact, in previous episodes of the live stream, we have used Aftermath Live and our simulation software to answer some of the questions that you have. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can get a 10% discount on your first month of the basic and research editions of Aftermath Live by using the coupon code PINEYouTube10 when you're at checkout. Aftermath Live is a powerful tool and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Go to aftermathlive.com to check it out. Link is in the description below. Our live streams are normally on Fridays from 1 to 3 p.m. They normally last about 2 hours, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. If you miss the live stream, you'll always be able to watch it on our YouTube channel, and in the description we put timestamps for every question that was asked. This way you can look through the description and find the questions that are most relevant to your research and then watch those at your leisure. Also, we apologize in advance if we mispronounce your name. If on a YouTube channel you can put anything you want as a name. It could be a Pokemon, it could be a string of numbers. But if we call you out and we accidentally mispronounce your name, we apologize in advance. Lastly, please do not spam the chat. We've had numerous instances of people either talking about inappropriate things or constantly filling the chat up with some kind of spam. We will remove you if you do that. Let's keep the chat very clean and just talk about electrochemistry. Sometimes it takes a while before we're able to answer your question. So if you keep typing your question into the chat and spam the chat, then we will remove you from the chat. But if it's been a while and we may have forgotten about your question, one message as a gentle reminder is all that's required. All right, I think that's all of the housekeeping things. Now, let's start the live stream. All right, hello everybody.
Still 100 episodes.
Still 100 episodes.
102. Is it 102?
It is 102.
101,
but we're still celebrating 100, at least getting to 100.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of when it's February 13th and people are still saying Happy New Year. It's like, you know what we need? We need like, like the IUPAC, right? It's International Union of
pure
applied chemistry. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So they're just as qualified as a regulatory group as any to rule on this very important topic. We need an official day where before that day, you're allowed to continue saying Happy New Year. But after that day, you go to prison for 10 years. So like February 2nd, right? If you say Happy New Year on February 1st to someone, it's good. But on February 2nd, if you tell somebody Happy New Year, you go to jail. Is that fair?
So you know, Neil, I love playing devil's advocate. I always like thinking about.
Okay, bring it. Let's go.
But the condition of saying Happy New Year to somebody is that you have not seen them since the New Year, because it's on an individual basis. So for like your neighbor on like the 3rd of January, you may wave to them and say Happy New Year.
Because you see them.
Because you see them. But then after that, if you say Happy New Year to them on the 4th, it's like you're a weirdo. You need to just say hello.
Okay.
Because that condition's already been met.
Okay. Counter argument. I don't see my third cousin very often. Let's say I see her, in April.
Yeah.
Okay. If I said Happy New Year to my third cousin in April when I see her, and I haven't seen her in 8 months, and I say Happy New Year, I'm no longer part of the family. I'm excommunicated. That's inappropriate. True. That's a ridiculous amount of time to say it, and I'm probably going to go to prison, right? Which is correct.
Yeah. There are boundary conditions.
That's right.
Associated with saying Happy New Year.
That's right. So in conclusion, we have at least 105 episodes worth of this that we will leave.
Yeah.
Because beyond that, we will go to prison. But until then, we're going to celebrate 100 like it just happened, even though we're definitely 2 weeks removed from it. But I promise I will respect the IUPAC's ruling on the statute of limitations for celebrating things well beyond their expiration time limit.
Well, we can't say everybody, we can't say everybody just goes to jail, because Barry has a question.
That's true. And if we go to jail, we can't answer anyone's question.
But he also says at the end, Happy New Year. So
look, Barry,
we can't throw Barry in jail.
I don't want to throw you in jail, but I'm warning you. Unless you mean like, the Chinese New Year is a different time, right? So
yes,
it could be a different New Year. I'm just saying we can't assume that he means the Gregorian calendar where we
correct.
That was the Gregorian, right? Anyway, could be a different culture's New Year, so I'll let it slide just this once. But if you say it again, right to jail.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't say Happy New Year to someone who's celebrating Chinese New Year. You would say either Happy Chinese New Year or I believe it's 新年快乐. That's Happy New Year in Chinese. So you would say that. It would be a different phrase.
That's a different thing
altogether.
Okay, so then we can still send people to prison because it is clear which New Year you're referring to. So that you're just backing up my point. First you were going devil's advocate, now you're backing me up.
I'm backing you up on that one.
I appreciate it. I knew I was right, so it's fine.
All right, Barry's question. What does a photoelectrochemical cell setup with an H cell look like? LSV, bright light source. Where do working reference counter electrodes sit?
Let me pull up. You can talk about it. I think I want to pull up. I made a new version of this cell
Oh, okay.
like somewhat recently. It's on our website. I forget the number. I'll find it.
Oh, yeah.
I work
that's
at this
right.
company.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it's 380 is the number. I'm going to find it. I'll show you like an example. And this is not the only example, Barry, but nope, that's it. For some reason, I always think that's the number. Anyway, you can.
Oh, remember, this is also an H cell setup. So this is an
Oh,
H cell
H-cell.
photoelectrochemical cell. So
Good
this
point.
is as if we may have to just draw this with
yeah.
good old fashioned PowerPoint review.
Oh boy, that's our thing.
That's our thing. This is how I think about an H cell setup for, and I think I'm sharing.
I should probably check that. Yes, you are.
I am. So you can have a couple different, I guess, configurations, generally speaking. So this is our H cell, which is really just a big letter H.
It looks like the letter H.
Letter H. There's some kind of, frit, some porous thing in between.
I can see why they call it that.
You would generally have the counter electrode in one chamber. So this would be your counter electrode. And then you'd have your reference electrode, which I'm just going to make it look a little bit like this for now. I know it doesn't actually, doesn't go all the way here, but this is just reference. Now, for a photoelectrochemical cell, when you're using an H cell for this type of thing, I'm imagining you're doing like photoelectrocatalysis. So you probably have something that's fairly large, some kind of big
wafer
or something like that. And then you shine light on it. You're shining light onto your photoanode, photocathode. Maybe it's evolving some gas. Maybe there's some other reaction occurring here because it's a counter electrode. And I know it's like, well, what does this thing look like? It's like, oh, it looks like this, but this isn't like physically what it looks like. This is usually curved. The surface of the of like this is like a cylinder that you put your like a graduated cylinder, for example, that you would put your cell and your reference electrode into. But ideally, you'd want this to be a little flatter. You'd want this to be flat so that the light perfectly comes in. But generally speaking, as long as the material is like quartz, so that the light goes through.
There can still be some refraction in a curved surface, even in quartz, I think, though, right?
Oh, yeah. The quartz is just so that the UV component of the light gets through.
I was going to show our separated cell just as an example with a flat surface.
Yeah. Why don't you show that?
Just I did find a couple of products, and again, one of them was not this is the this one here. So as an example for an H cell, what Alex was showing was an H cell where, for example, there'd be like a glass frit in between. This is an example of one where, for instance, you will have a separator. It could be a membrane of some kind that you put yourself. So there's like two cells, right, like this, that come together in the middle, and then it's just as Alex drew, where these are sort of illustrated. These are some renderings that I made, but you see that the electrodes, for instance, might be in one side, some in one side, some on the other side. But the main point being that here's another image of this. So some electrodes on one side, but this one has a flat. You see this side of it here, and I'm kind of wiggling it around here. It's flat. So that's just another slight modification where when you're shining the light in, you can try to design them where it's like a cylinder on its side. So there's a flat surface where that's made of quartz where you can, have the light shine through unimpeded. Yeah. So that's sometimes where the design, is improved. Let's just say for the light, purpose of it, I guess. So
yeah. And regarding the position of working reference and counter, reference and working are typically in the same chamber, and then the counter is always in a separate chamber. Just from just to make sure that's clear.
Yes.
All right, let's move on. The questions have started coming in. So Simple Rag has a question. I am doing GCD of graphene for supercapacitor application. Instead of a triangular shape, I am getting rectangular shape at 10 to 0.5 amps per gram current density, how to get triangular shape.
What do you mean by triangular shape? I'm trying to.
For a charge discharge experiment, I mean, aren't all charge discharge experiments mostly rectangles?
Well,
or no, is he talking like
I'm trying to
like curves up
this
and
is
then
a
goes
is this a
down?
supercapacitor one?
Yeah.
Supercapacitor? I'm a bit of a visual learner here.
Mhm.
I need to like look because I mean I sort of know it with batteries intuitively, but I just so I guess again I think you're referring to just to share like it's just a quick image search. I assume what you're referring to is that you're not getting this kind of thing where it am I sharing? I think I am.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, you're sharing.
So like the plot on the right here where it goes up and then down in some or like these experimental curves here.
Oh.
I'm guessing that's what you mean. Uh
Perhaps.
so like where it goes up to, so I'm guessing that's what you mean by rectangle. I haven't heard, for instance, someone describe it as triangular, but let me propose one possibility, and I don't know if this is precisely the answer for you, but it's the one thing that comes to mind. And if this is the case, it's actually just a difference in plotting convention. And so my guess, for instance, is that if you have voltage on this axis, and this axis is, um, let's just call it time, but it's capacity as well. But you know, you're applying some. This is GCD, so you're applying some current, right? Is whatever you said, 0.5 amps per gram, whatever your current applied is, or a specific current, right? So let's just say 0.5 amps per gram. Well, it starts off at V lower, whatever, and it goes to V upper, right? Those are the limits. Okay, so the triangular, I'm guessing, is like it's going to go up from one to the other, and then you go back down, whatever. And so this is like a triangle. Sometimes I think what people show is something like, or what maybe what you're seeing is you get this and then back down like that or something. And so this red one is a rectangle. Again, this might not be precisely, and you can please simple rod
I think
comment.
he said yes. Well, he just said yes.
Yeah, you said yes. So, but my point is like, is it that you're getting the red one and you're not getting the black one? But if you are, like so in other words, what the red one that I just drew here, just to be clear, this is a bit of a convention thing, is that sometimes instead of, for example, on the black one, this triangle happens only because we're not resetting the time axis. So so what I mean by that is we have our GCD and we first charge it up, right? Okay, and that took from 0 to T1 minutes or seconds or hours or years, whatever. Sometimes what you do is that you then, so this is the charge, whatever, whether it's a battery or supercapacitor. Then let's say my discharge curve, right? We sometimes start it over. So sometimes you'll see, okay, well the discharge curve is like a fresh curve, so I'm starting up here and I'm gonna go down like that. So it's like you re-zero your time. Sometimes you draw it starting at, you almost like go backwards in time, but it's just a plotting convention. Like this is all the same thing. It's just depending on how you plot it. I know this looks weird. It's like going backwards in time, but the triangle shape will happen if you just don't reset the time. And so it's like you charged up and it took 2 minutes. All right. And then at 2 minutes you discharge. And so the discharge went from 2 minutes to 4 minutes. And so we have it all going forward in time. But that's just a convention. We don't have to plot it that way. So that's my only guess in some way is it just a plotting convention thing as far as how you're representing your data, not like the red one. Okay, so you're not like going back in time. I guess I don't know. Yeah, that's some of this might be hard to answer only because I don't frankly know. I understand you're trying to get the triangle plot. You're trying to get to look like what I'm drawing. So that appears to be the case. But without seeing an example of your data, I guess I don't understand what you mean by you're getting a rectangular shape. I don't know. I'm trying to think it through. Like if the curve goes out and then what would make that look like a rectangle? Is it just straight lines? Like I don't, I'd have to see your plot to know what you mean by rectangular. And then I could maybe assess what might be the cause of that, but I can't picture what I was just drawing, how that would form a rectangle shape, because the voltage is on the y-axis, it's going up, it's moving somewhere, and so there's a curve no matter how you slice it. So I don't know, I can say too much more than that simple without seeing the the rectangle that you're referring to. It's normal rectangle waveform. Well, then this might just be a plotting convention, because if the rectangle waveform occurs when you put voltage on the x-axis, that's like doing a CV where you go back and forth. The GCD is plotting voltage on the y-axis. It's different. It's separate. The x-axis being voltage means you go back, you go forth. The voltage is going up and then down. And so if on the x-axis the voltage goes up and then back, it makes a rectangle. But if you put voltage on the y-axis, as is the convention for GCD, maybe his question is he's getting a GCD like a battery. Well, yeah, exactly. Meliodas, the battery, the way I drew that curve is typical for batteries. And a lot of times supercapacitors, they do the similar kind of a test where you get that triangle looking shape. But also in supercapacitors, you do voltammetry, which is actually not a galvanostatic method, it's a potentiostatic method, and you sweep the potential back and forth. And so that's what makes a rectangle like shape, because the voltage is the thing sweeping on the x-axis in a regular way. So so these are fundamentally different
so if it's
plotting conventions, I guess.
If it's GCD, is it possible that to get the rectangular waveform, could it just be like it's charging super fast, like it's getting to the voltage really quickly, holding it for some time, and then like when you discharge it, it goes really quickly to like the lower end of the voltage,
Could be,
and then goes straight.
but then it would still be like there's still a up and then a down, so it's still like, and if you're saying you're holding it up here, I guess, but
the up is super high.
Yeah,
it's super fast.
If it's up, it still makes a V, a triangle, no matter how you slice it. It goes up and then it goes down. I mean, if it's like straight up and it's instantaneous,
yeah.
Well, if you just zoom in on that x-axis enough, it'll make a curve. Right?
Well, yeah.
I mean,
so then it could be a time resolution issue, possibly.
But again, I think this is just a plotting convention, is my guess, because I mean, yeah, if it's just like instantly up and down, it's probably something with your material, like your material.
It's holding. Okay, so it's going up and then it's holding for a while, and then it's going. So on the time scale, it'll look a little more like, I guess, a rectangle. But
well, if it's holding,
like stepping.
If it's holding, that just also sounds more of a programmatic problem. Like a galvanostatic charge discharge is fundamentally where you have an upper voltage limit. Plotting is correct. Okay, well, you have an upper and lower voltage limit, which is to say when the voltage hits the upper point, it shouldn't hold like that. It should be done. It's over. It's charged. Like if your plot is that you're charging it with a certain amount of current, like 0.5 amps per gram, until you get to 1 volt, whatever the upper volting limit is, and then it's holding at 1 volt, something is wrong. That's like hitting a limit on your voltage range or your current range. It's like you're hitting a limit, or you're hitting a range problem. This is not like, this is a potentiostator or a software problem or something, like,
because they're conditions, right? Like they're conditions when you tell someone to charge and discharge.
Yes.
Well, like, hey, once it reaches this voltage, then start doing this thing.
Yeah.
But if you didn't tell it to like stop, and you gave it a time constraint, like only hold it for this long, then maybe it's only doing the logic where it's holding it for this like long period of time, and then it's doing it. So it's not actually like.
Also, to be clear, it is not holding the same current and the same voltage forever. Like you can't control both of them.
Correct.
So that's not possible. But just that behavior is bizarre. It doesn't reach the given higher voltage.
Interesting. So yeah, he says it doesn't reach the given higher voltage.
So you're not hitting the. I see. So okay. So let me. Now I think I understand.
Okay.
So what you're getting is, for example, you're doing a galvanostatic charge discharge. This is your upper limit. This is your lower limit. And instead of it reaching there, it's like not getting there. It's just doing this. Like it isn't reaching, no matter how much current you put into it. So this sometimes happens with batteries, and I don't have, I have more of a knowledge of batteries of how this I don't know if it's the same phenomenon with supercapacitors and materials as it is with batteries. But when you have a battery that is incapable of reaching its voltage, no matter how much you try to charge it, it doesn't get there, and the voltage isn't increasing. It means you're just ripping the electrolyte apart like endlessly. Like something else is happening. There's something fundamentally wrong with your material or your setup. Sometimes this happened like early in my process when I was studying batteries. I would sometimes make one, and it was like I couldn't get the voltage. I was like testing a carbon material or whatever it was. It does happen with carbon. And it was like the voltage was just hanging like that, like I think like you're describing. And this was a battery, so maybe it's related, but not exactly the same as a supercap. But it's the same kind of thing. The voltage never ticked up and never went. It's like it never stopped charging. It was my fault. It was my mistake. The thing was made improperly, in one way or another. I can't precisely remember like what it was, but there's something. It's just whipping the electrolyte apart, or there's a side reaction occurring, or I'm just ripping apart the carbon, or something else is happening. Like it's not the long and short is that it is not doing the reaction that you think it's doing. In other words, it's not doing the capacitance, it's not doing the charging, it's not doing it. You should disregard this. You need to like fix. You need to remake your electrode. Is my point. So recycling battery anode material and expecting to use it in a super. Yeah, that's a cool idea. But when you're seeing this happening, it means something else is happening. It requires some more investigation, but what it probably doesn't mean is that it's behaving in the manner that you want it to. And it probably is an electrode construction thing. So look into that. I would suggest. I have seen that happen before, like I said, when it doesn't reach the set point, or you have perhaps mistaken one way or another what the upper limit should be. It could be a mistake. I mean, probably not. You probably looked into it pretty well. Like, well, it should hit 1 volt and it's getting stuck at 0.3 or something. Like, probably not your error, but just double check that you typed in all your numbers correctly and that you assessed the literature, for instance, and that you're not saying, oh, it's supposed to go to, I think it should go to 2 volts. Oh, whoops, it only needs to go to 1, or I don't know. Make sure that the numbers that you're selecting as your cutoffs are accurate. That's my other suggestion. But I'm sure probably that's not the issue.
Yeah. Okay. The next question's from LinkedIn, from Akash. Akash is saying, hey, I've started electrochemistry experiments a year back. So I know how cyclic voltammetry helps to learn redox reactions. I would want to understand the redox properties from chronopotentiometry. Can you help in it? So Akash, chronopotentiometry, the only so this is when you hold at a constant current and then you measure the potential. There is one equation that I am familiar with that goes over chronopotentiometry, and that's something called the Sand equation, which I'm showing here. And in the Sand equation, it states that the current times the transition time raised to the 1/2 power divided by the concentration of your analyte is equal to somewhat of a Cottrell form, NFA, the diffusion coefficient to the 1/2 power times pi to the 1/2 power divided by 2. This is kind of the same thing, so that has the units of this expression. And you end up getting these curves that look like this for a chronopotentiometry experiment. And so this is, just current is just you're flowing current into the system. The reaction is occurring. It's holding the potential. And then at a certain point, what we call the transition time, you get this spike, this huge spike going upwards. And this has to do with the reaction being complete. So the reaction is completed. The potentiostat is now trying to do some other kind of reaction to maintain the current that you are trying to hold. So if you're trying to hold it at 10 milliamps, and you've consumed all of your reactant, your CO is now consumed, then it might start adjusting the voltage to some level where it'll do something else. So you want to know about like understanding the redox properties of your reactants, but really chronopotentiometry is used primarily for electrolysis, just converting one thing to another. But the only kind of mathematical expressions that people have for this is the Sand equation. So at best, you can learn what the quote transition time is, as well as maybe the diffusion coefficient. But besides that, there's not that much more you can, in my opinion, really learn from chronopotentiometry in terms of redox properties and things like that.
Yeah. Galvanostatic charge discharge that I was just talking about with respect to supercapacitors and batteries is chronopotentiometry actually as well. And that kind of curve that Alex just showed is similar to the kind of curve that you will see when you're doing charging or discharging of a battery. And that is actually just chronopotentiometry. But to your point, the things that you're extracting from that when you're doing battery charging and discharging is usually things like capacity. They're not redox properties per se, right? It's you're learning how long can I pump current into my thing before the voltage changes dramatically or whatever. You're still learning the same thing. And the Sand equation doesn't often come into play for calculation purposes there. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that galvanostatic charge discharge, that's another name for chronopotentiometry as well.
Yes.
So I think Hasit has a question here. That I have screen printed electrodes. They're manufactured by you, but sometimes they don't give accurate results when used. What is the reason? They're about 6 years old. It's because they're 6 years old. No, so there are, I assume you're referring to the ceramic ones. We have a couple different flavors of screen printed electrodes. We have carbon ones on a PET substrate, and then we have ceramic ones with gold or platinum traces on them. If moving forward, assuming that they're the ceramic ones with gold or platinum, frankly, there is normal wear and tear that can occur with any electrode over time, and it depends on how they were stored, right? If the surface is kind of fouled over time, or if they haven't been, if it's oxidized or something, and they've been. These things can happen with any electrode that's been sitting around for a long time, of course. These kinds of electrodes can last, indefinitely if they're kept and stored properly, but they do require a little bit of maintenance. Unfortunately, like other electrodes, like disc electrodes and things like that, where you can physically polish them, the screen printed electrodes cannot be physically polished in the same way. You'll effectively destroy it and wipe the trace away. And so you're left with either chemical or electrochemical methods of cleaning. I think that our document, for instance, we have our website, if you find the web page for our screen printed electrodes, we have a document that kind of describes some of these processes. But in brief, the electrochemical cleaning is quite simple. Like even if you're doing non-aqueous things with them, for instance, or whatever you're testing, you can do a kind of electrochemical cleaning, which is simply just like, for example, if it's the platinum screen printed electrode, you can just get a solution with half molar sulfuric acid, get your screen printed electrode in the electrolyte, and your first scan might be like that, like amorphous and ugly, and you're just going to scan over and over and over again at some moderate scan rate, like 50 millivolts per second, 100 millivolts per second, until hopefully it kind of settles into like a normal, appropriate looking platinum CV. So, something like the green curve. So like it'll just eventually start tracing on itself. And this kind of repetitive cyclic voltammetry is what we sort of call electrochemical cleaning. And it's pretty common on all electrodes, but in particular the screen printed ones, because they can the surfaces can get fouled and sort of oxidized, or just over time. They like any electrode, you use it to needs some refreshing, let's just say. And so this kind of electrochemical cleaning can be helpful. Sometimes you can push the potential up higher to, like, if you have some stubborn stuff on the surface, you can push the electrode potential a little bit higher to like really oxidize, or lower, as the case may be, push the window a little bit to oxidize or reduce some species on the surface that can sometimes help. Apart from that, there's just chemical cleaning methods like just rinsing it, you know, in deionized water and acetone maybe or whatever, or something as slightly more aggressive as like we call it baby piranha solution. For instance, piranha. I always screw this up. It's
Oh yeah, 30,
it's
3 to 1.
it's hydrochloric acid. No, sorry, it's
Sulfuric
acid and peroxide. For some reason, I always think it's hydrochloric and it's sulfuric acid.
Mhm.
So it's sulfuric acid and peroxide, and it's 3 to 1 of sulfuric acid.
Yeah,
And
it's
you want to
like
make sure
it's 3 parts sulfuric acid
1
to
part
like
peroxide.
1 part peroxide,
Yeah.
and like regular piranha is like 30%
or
hydrogen
50%.
peroxide,
Right.
and but like baby, I think it's like 3%.
Yeah, we say 3 or 5%.
3 or 5%.
So yes, you can make this solution and be very careful. Read about
Yeah.
it before you make it because
Very dangerous.
you want to add one to the other, and like if you add
Oh yeah,
if you add the acid
like-
to the peroxide, it's very dangerous, or the other way around. And I'm
I-
screwing up. One order is very volatile. It's a dangerous thing, so please be safe if you're using this. But the point is, you can use a lower concentration of the peroxide part, and we call it baby piranha, and it'll help kind of remove some surface films and things of that you
Yeah.
know, things like that. So you can kind of like dip your screen print electrode, you know, before or between electrochemical cleaning steps. So that's a chemical cleaning step. You can give that a try as well.
Yeah. Well, mostly for like platinum and gold, possibly. Like
Yeah, for the carbon, this is not
carbon. It's not going to work.
It's not going to work. Those electrodes are meant to be sort of a single use kind of a thing.
Yeah.
The only the ceramic ones with platinum and gold are meant for this kind of process that I'm describing.
Yeah.
So
hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
Meliodas has a question. 60. He says, I was doing a Tafel extrapolation experiment with iron foil as the working electrode in 1 molar iron sulfate electrolyte. I always got a dip in the curve in the cathodic region of the plot. Why is this occurring?
It's probably iron plating.
In the Tafel plot?
Sorry, in the Tafel plot.
Yeah,
Tafel extrapolation experiment.
I'm assuming you have a. This is a Tafel experiment.
Well, are you referring to the cathodic region of the plot? Are you referring to?
Gets a dip.
I don't. I'm trying to. I guess my follow-up questions are: is this the dip in the Tafel plot or the voltammogram?
Yeah.
And if it's the Tafel plot, for instance, sometimes what that is interpreted as I understand it, is you'll get sort of like multiple regions in the Tafel plot, and people will take the slope, for example, at those different regions. So like on your Tafel plot, you'll have something that looks like this, and you can comment if this isn't what you mean, and I'll try to refocus here. But as a first, I don't know, guess, if you have your Tafel plot, for instance, voltage is here, and this is like log of I. So this is the current density. So you might have something where it's like, let's say this is the E0. So let's say your Tafel slope is like this, and then it dips. I'm just guessing here, right? Sometimes what people do is they'll say, well, this is like Tafel slope 1, right? And then this right here is like Tafel slope 2, and that's at a more cathodic, right? This is like cathodic region 1, and then this is, region 2. So it's like you have different, like this is like potentials less than, you have 2 different regions. So you might have different processes occurring at different cathodic potentials. I can't speak perfectly well to this, but like I know iron has a lot of different like oxidation and reduction potentials associated with it. Like it might just be like this is, Fe, redox number 1, and then this is number 2. I don't know. Is there a follow-up?
Oh yeah, he says it's a Y-shaped plot. So I guess it's a Tafel plot. He's talking about the Y shape that's coming out
like that.
Yeah, or flipped whichever way you have
whichever
the
way
X and Y
or
axis.
it's like this, whatever.
To get Y-shaped plot you get when you do the linear polarization to get the Tafel extrapolation to get data about corrosion potential
Okay.
and corrosion current.
Yeah, I usually put the Y on the other axis, but
Yeah.
you're probably referring to it like more like this, like that kind of a thing. And so
Yeah.
this is the Y, this is the voltage axis, this is the log of the I. It doesn't really matter. I like to see it the other way, just my personal preference. But whatever. If you're talking about the Y, so this right here is the cathodic part, and then this is the anodic part. So you're saying it dips or whatever? Maybe is that maybe something like that?
Does it come back up? That's also another question. I'm like, if it's a dip, does it mean that it comes back up, or does it just go down?
So speaking very broadly about this, honestly, when you go very far from the E core or the E0, whatever, however you're calling, if it's a corrosion kind of a thing, you call it E core or whatever. When you go very far on either side of for your Tafel, the behavior starts to can look kind of it should be linear. Yeah, so it should be linear. You could have a number of problems, right? Number one is that it could be an inappropriately made Tafel plot, which is like my main
comes
thing.
back
Back again.
No, it comes back again. Interesting.
You might not have kinetic current. Like it might not mean anything because you're probably, if you're doing voltammetry or whatever, this might not be a Tafel plot. Implies that the data is entirely kinetic, and you might be making a Tafel plot and assuming it's all kinetic information, and it's just not. You might have effects from diffusion or capacitive effects and things of that nature, clouding your data. And so
if you have a dip in the cathodic region, the way I think of it is if you made the Tafel plot using CV, even at a very slow scan rate, a peak can show up at just a potential where if there's an impurity that's getting reduced on the surface, and I mean, he says it's possible that there could be iron plating. That
for sure.
Yeah, reduction of iron 2 or iron 3 plus. Onto the surface, and then you move past that.
And that might be part of it too. Like the Tafel that you're studying is with respect to a E0, and you're sweeping, or adjusting the potential at around that E0. But if you move far below, in this case, to the cathodic region, the cathodic region below that E0, near the E0 of another reaction, like let's say that E0 is iron, 2 plus going to iron 1 plus. Okay. And then you go more negative and you get to iron 1 plus going to iron neutral plating.
Yeah.
Well, now even if that data is properly made Tafel and it's actually kinetic current and you're making your Tafel plot appropriately, which I would generally doubt in most cases, that tends to be an assumption that's not met properly. But let's just say it is. Well, now your Tafel plot is at the very least convoluted for multiple Faradaic processes. So like your Tafel slope isn't going to be meaningful from the perspective that like that Tafel slope you're getting is with respect to a Faradaic process, one. So if you have two happening, which is the one, right? It's at least convoluted. And so that might be why you're getting some dips or some changing concavity and those kinds of things, because you have multiple processes. Once you polarize far enough on either side, you're just getting influence from other Faradaic processes. And iron, I think, is one where that happens. So there's a lot of redox processes that can happen on iron, and including if you go negative enough, for sure you're going to start plating iron onto you have iron sulfate, so you have iron ions in solution, and you have an iron electrode. So you're going to certainly have a proclivity to plate more Fe onto the foil or whatever you're using, right? I think it's a foil. So that sounds plausible for sure.
Yeah. And my guess is also, I don't know, maybe the iron foil also has oxidation states in it. And so you could literally just be changing the iron 3 plus to iron 2 plus, no purely surface bound, chemistry. And that's it, and you get like a dip. You just get like a peak almost that's non-diffusion controlled. I might even recommend doing a scan rate study, because I'm assuming this is coming from CV. So see if you change the potential in your CV going purely cathodic, does that peak increase in current? And then you can start to determine whether it's a diffusion control process that's in the solution, or if it's a surface bound species, and
Or
if that peak is like has like a logarithmic relationship or
or even
something
like
like
at the
that.
very least, if you do a CV before you make the Tafel transformation, and you go like you scan and you get this peak, and then you get another peak, or it just dips and goes whatever. It's like if this is your CV and this is current and this is voltage, this is not Tafel. This is just a
Yeah.
cyclic voltammogram or a linear sweep. And it's like if this is the process you're trying to study or whatever, you like can't go more negative than this because you're going to start doing this process like the next one, right? So like at the very least, you're limited in how far cathodic, like if this is the E0 right here, right? If this is your E0, you can only go to like this point right here. You can't go any more negative because now you're starting to get like E0, number 2 or whatever. Like that's not O2, but you know what I mean? You're gonna have convolution from the other process. And maybe this is Fe plating. I don't know. But the point is you can do cyclic voltammetry or linear sweep and like isolate the voltage range around which the process you're trying to get Tafel information about is occurring. And then even then, the fact that you have this kind of a peak means that making a Tafel plot is not a great idea because this part of the curve is diffusion and that makes it not Tafel.
I was just thinking that
anyway,
if you have the
2 millivolts per second might be too fast.
I'm actually, I just realized something because in Tafel plots, you're looking at the absolute value of the current. So a dip in the current in this case actually means that you're getting less. Does it mean you're getting like less negative current?
The current's going this way. It means the current is
because
going
like
smaller
because it's a Y.
Yeah.
So like you have anodic and then you have cathodic. Increasing negative current, a dip means that the current went
closer to zero,
or like it went
so that's like mass transport, like the peak is going back towards zero, right?
Yeah, it's like there's less negative current,
right? Which means that it's making a peak, which means, as I said,
yeah,
I just drew that peak, for example. It's fundamentally fraught because a peak happens in a voltammogram because of the growth of a diffusion layer, which causes mass transport limitations, and a Tafel implies kinetic only. So some of this might just be the impact. Like you're drawing. I know we can see it, but if it's something like that,
I'll just
that might be that might be
people know what I'm talking about.
The kind of thing that is a convoluting factor, right? If there's a dip and it comes back.
Yeah, like this is what I'm thinking about. This this represents increasing negative current,
right?
And this is a dip,
right.
Meaning
so
we're having less negative.
That's like the voltammogram peak manifested in a Tafel plot or something like that.
And in a CV, this would look like, because it's negative, it's like here, it's like this.
Right. It's a peak.
It's a peak. Yeah.
And again, the existence of a peak invalidates the use of the Tafel effectively.
Well, yeah. It
just does.
Yeah. It's it no longer follows.
The current kicks back up because diffusion is limiting its progression, let's just say.
Interesting. Yeah.
And if diffusion is limiting its progression, it's not kinetic, and therefore you can't make a Tafel plot. And if that's happening for a different reason, because it's like the best you can say is you can just take an aggregate slope through the dip and just assume it's not there. Assume it's there's something happening, some convolution of multiple processes, or there's a blip with mass transport, and you can just still get an average slope, and you can just assume the error associated with that. But fundamentally, you're violating the law of Butler-Volmer equation, which is my crusade.
He says it's like like that. There's something else. There's some other process happening.
The best I would say, Meliodas, is take the slope through it and just get an average. And when you're talking about it, acknowledge the error associated with that, but it's still a reasonable estimate of Tafel behavior per se. But there's convolution from non-kinetic effects and possibly multiple Faradaic processes, possibly iron plating, things of that nature. But you can still say like, well, the value is indicative of a process that's roughly proceeding, blah, blah, blah. Like you can still like intelligently try to draw some conclusions to it. In my opinion, if you would just acknowledge some of the shortfalls associated with it. That would be my opinion.
Yeah.
I know I rail about this all the time, but you can still like acknowledge where there's like, I'm doing the best I can. I have some limitations, but I'm still trying to draw conclusions. Like that's still a reasonable thing to do. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's
All
move on.
right. Yeah,
here.
we gotta move on to the.
Yeah.
Let's see.
All right. So Usman, I think.
Usman has the next one.
Yeah. So it says, I have some EIS data of stainless steel fiber felt for oxygen evolution reaction that shows transmission line for higher molarity. Interesting. What would be the appropriate transmission line model for fitting?
He also has a second.
Right.
It looks like a question. Second follow up
For some EIS
data.
Data for foil, let's say stainless steel. I have noticed that it fits 2 Randles circuit as well as embedded Randles, but in the case of nested Randles, Rct and Cdl fit only for the second RC. All right, let me try to tackle this. First part here. So you have data of stainless steel fiber for an oxygen evolution, which shows a transmission line for higher molarity. I can't answer this question specifically other than to just talk through what your possible transmission line options would be. So for instance, this is what a transmission line looks like in its most general form. Am I sharing it? I am. Okay. So this is, you have all these elements here. Let's get rid of the inductor because nobody cares about inductors. So you have a leading resistor, and then you have this side here, ZA, and then you have this side on the right, ZB. All right. These can change depending on the specific situation. Now, what should your model look like? Well, it's going to depend. Let me pull up a webinar slide while I mention this here. I know I'm not sharing the webinar yet.
Oh yeah, no,
I'll get there. Promise. Fitting this one somewhere in here. All right. Okay. So what I want to share is just this transmission line on top of an electrode, so I can show you what I mean. And right here. So what should your specific transmission line model be? Something like this. But what you're going to have to do is assess. So clearly what you have is a felt or some sort of porous microstructure. And so the transmission line is used to assess that porous microstructure. Now, a simplification of that is sometimes like this, where you have a resistance through the electrolyte, you have a resistance through the electrode pore. Sometimes the first simple thing is this X2 down here is neglectable. So you only have, so the resistance through the electrolyte is much greater than the resistance through the electrode itself, through a difference in conductivity. And so that's one simplification. And then basically what you're looking at is the middle element, which I call Y. You'll see different nomenclature throughout the literature and things like that, but we just call it Y for our purposes, is the sort of Faradaic reaction of interest. And so a lot of times the simplest thing is to just put an RQ, like it's not a void element here, as the repeating unit that helps capture the charge distribution throughout the pore. Sometimes that's just a capacitance. If you don't have any Faradaic process happening, you can just put a Q here instead of the RQ. That's one option. And then the ZA and the ZB, which we call, again, ZA and ZB, those are the boundary conditions. And so, again, I can't sort of answer specifically for your case, but a lot of times it's not actually this complicated because you don't have any sort of different, this is like if you have a certain boundary condition one way or another at the edge of the pore, maybe there's something plated there that causes a different reaction, or maybe at the the current collector down here has a different kind of behavior than, if this is all one material, it's all stainless steel, maybe there's no difference between the boundary and the Y element. If, let's say, this is like stainless steel on platinum or whatever, some dissimilar metal at the base, then the boundary at the innermost part is going to be a little different because the metal is different or something of that nature. So these are iteratable components. And then the last bit to say is that just the behavior, graphically, the behavior changes depending on which elements are there. So like, for example, if they're all unspecified RQs or whatever, then you might have something that looks like that. I assume it looks something like this. I didn't put any values in. I need to put values in. I'm just being lazy. It'll look something like this. We have this sort of lagging element here, and then there's a semicircle or whatever. If you have there's presets like bis square open and bis square short models, for instance. Sometimes those look a little different, where it shoots more straight up, or there's a bigger semicircle. I don't know if I can sort of. Sometimes you get kind of like, not that that's wonky. You get this sort of behavior where it's like almost like straight up. Sometimes that's an open, which open boundary condition. Again, these are just sort of they're like mathematical concepts, but we represent them with the transmission line. And I can't really always answer that perfectly well for you, for your system. It depends on what you have present in your system. See, here's like this is when it's like all capacitive. There's no Faraday processes. You'll have a little bit of this 45-degree bit that's like the diffusional kind of thing. Looks like a Warburg open as well. There's open reflecting boundary conditions. So I'm just mentioning some of the things that go along with it because I can't answer specifically for your system. I don't have your data. I don't have your, that's why the software that I'm showing you, my company's software, is helpful to adjust the model and see how that changes it. If you don't have software that allows you to change the elements of the transmission line, it can be harder to know what to pick for each thing. Whereas if you have our software, you can simulate each one and say, well, if I make this just a Q, that looks more like my data. If I make it an R, it doesn't look like my data. So then I can kind of infer from my data, the way it looks, what elements should be should be where. So anyway, that's my answer for your transmission line one. It is going to take probably some trial and error to a certain extent, but hopefully that kind of talks through that a little bit. And then the second part here, you're saying, let me try to wrap my head around this. You fit 2 Randles circuits as well as the embedded. That's not unusual. In the case of the nested Randles, RCT and CDL fit only for the second RC. So one explanation of that is that it isn't the right model. It's possible. Another is that you may need to finesse more yourself and figure it out. Like it depends on the software you're using, of course, but you might be finding an inability to fit the first RC, for instance, of the nested or the embedded model, because the algorithm is getting stuck into like a local minima, and you have to massage those values yourself. Like again, like I was showing you in our software, we have little bars I can slide around and change the values. Those are helpful for like if what the software is doing is it's like minimizing the value of the first R or C. For instance, you're saying it's only fitting the second one.
You just mentioned, embedded Randles and nested are the same.
Right. That's what I'm assuming. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying this one. That was my assumption. When you said nested, I assumed you mean embedded. So again, to your point, the embedded one or the nested one looks more like this right here. Right. And so if you're finding that it's only fitting the second one, like in this case, the nested or the nested model or whatever, and you're not getting both humps, right, or semicircles or whatever, something like that, and it's not showing up properly. It might just be that you need to be able to play with the values of these capacitors or CPEs manually to like kick the algorithm into compliance, so to speak. Like it might be just a simple programmatic thing, like you're getting stuck. The software, you have to do something to get it to fit better. You might be like assuming that the software is going to find it and it isn't. That's one option, right? The other option is that this just isn't the appropriate model. But if you're pretty sure that it is, and honestly, it sounds, just because you have a porous kind of a thing, maybe you have a foil. If there's any sort of substrate film kind of interaction, the nested embedded model is likely, at the very least, feasible to use. So I would suggest you just kind of look into some of these sort of software tricks to try to fit it a little bit better. You'll have to play with the C values and maybe like lock one in place. Lock, if lock in place, so you force, like, lock the second C into a place, and force it to fit the first one. You know what I mean? Instead of allowing it to minimize, something like that. And some of this might just be a software limitation, as all software programs are just algorithms to minimize stuff. So you might be up against that, but it doesn't sound to me likely, just as a guess, that this is like never going to fit. It just sounds like you might have to massage it a little bit and work at trying to get it to fit a little better. That's my guess.
We had a question from Harish Kumar, but he retracted them on YouTube. I don't know whether or not we still want to answer retracted messages, or if we want to, because we do have a lot of questions.
Yeah, if he retracted them, I don't know if he was just impatient. I know he was asking to answer, and we as we say a lot, we're sorry if we don't get to your questions in a time that suits you. We're doing our best, and sometimes the answers take a little time. This is electrochemistry. It's not like, A, B, C, or D. C, next question. A, next, they take some time to flesh out and try to give you
a good answer.
We want to do everybody justice. We don't want to, brush off your question unless we just truly don't know the answer. But we can move on for now, I guess.
Okay. If he comes back,
if Harish Kumar, if you are back, we're sorry if it took some time, more than you expected, and apologies. But if you did need an answer, please come back. We'll try to prioritize your question as best we can, but we'll move on for now.
Yeah. One thing, I don't know, Neil, Usman, before we move on, Usman did mention one thing that it didn't work. He's using IviumSoft and ZView.
Yeah. So I've used ZView. I haven't used Ivium software. I can't speak to that personally, as far as like, well, click this button or do this exactly, it'll work better. I've used ZView. It's been some time since I used it. I suppose I've been at Pine for quite a while now. The tricky thing with some of these is that you're sort of, based on my memory, I suppose I'd say, is you're a bit limited in your ability to play with the parameters. Maybe you have to type in, like, if I remember, like, there's an interface and it has all the parameters and there's values of what it's sort of finding. But if the fit doesn't look good, you have to like type in, it'll be like 5e minus 6 is the value for C or something. And it's like, if that isn't good, you just have to like type in a different number and try to see if that pushes it. But it's like, it's not like as dynamic, I guess I'd say. So, I can only invite you to consider our software. It's pretty nice and smooth. As I was showing those bars sliding the parameter, like if it's not fitting right, you can just slide the bar around and change CDL actively to like any of a million different values and see if any of those start to fit. It kind of can help you visualize things. But other than that, I can't specifically say with certainty that the embedded model will or won't work, other than my hunch is that it would, just based on the electrode system you described. So best of luck to you.
So the next question that we have is from Hasif. He's asking, my circuit always gives a good CV result for the dummy cell, but sometimes it does not give correct CV results for the chemical cell using a screen printed electrode. What are the reasons? It could literally be anything. Doing a dummy cell test primarily will make sure that the potentiostat is working, that the electronics of the potentiostat are operating normally. There's no cell cable issues. The you can double check to make sure that when you apply, to a 1 kilo ohm resistor, if you apply 1 volt, you get like 1 milliamp. You can double check it to Ohm's law and just physics, but it doesn't tell you anything about the chemical system itself. So it could be a reference electrode issue on the screen print electrode. It could be some junk that's stuck on the working electrode surface. You've at least been able to minimize the problem to the chemical system. You can ensure that the potentiostat is fine, but it could be a variety of things that could be causing issues. And we don't see what the CV results look like. Sometimes when we look at those, we can actually tell, like, oh, this seems like you're getting no current, so maybe the counter electrode's not working. You're getting way too much current, maybe the reference electrode's not working. So we can't tell what exactly it could be, but it's probably not the potentiostat, and it's something with your chemical system. And most likely I would then just check your electrodes. Like, use a regular traditional electrodes, make sure that that works in your chemical cell, and then use the screen printed electrode. That would be another way to like tease out what the problem could be. Let's move on to some other questions, because I know there are a lot, and they.
Anirban says he met us at ACS in San Diego.
That's right, we were
I
there.
assume that was 2024, since ACS San Diego 2025 doesn't exist.
What are you talking about? We were there a few months ago.
Was it really? Was it this year?
We went to San Diego. Remember when I made you like drag the
that was this year.
UPS?
That wasn't last year.
That wasn't last year.
Oh man, I'm losing my mind. Are you serious? That was this year?
Yeah,
oh,
that was
man.
this year.
It's okay. I thought it was last year, man. That was this year. Well, it's good to see you.
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah.
I lost track of time, or I'm in some sort of space-time continuum where I'm actually in the year 2029 or something weird. I don't know what's going on.
We go to a lot of trade shows.
I
we
swear,
I
just thought that was last year. I really did. It's only May or June almost, and I was like, yeah, San Diego was last year, and it was like 3 months ago.
Yeah, that's right. It was like
time is a son of a gun.
Time is.
That was March, I guess. Good grief.
Yeah. I think probably. Yeah,
I have
March.
no concept of time apparently.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on.
March
Well, it was nice to see you as well.
Yeah. Thanks for the shout out.
Yeah. Good Lord. Okay. CP already answered. Yeah. Another nice comment from Anton. Congratulations, episode 100.
Yeah.
You make great work every Friday.
Thank you.
I would like to hear something.
He has kind of some follow up.
Oh, it looked like there was a typo there. Oh, okay. Something, if you don't mind. Yeah, okay. The first was like, is that a different language?
Yeah.
How would you define and highlight the importance of the electrochemical double layer for electrocatalysis? What real life analogy would you use to explain it? Oh man.
I've thought about a real life analogy for the electrical double layer. No, because the electrical double layer is so complicated. I had this idea once of an analogy for like electron transfer. Is like you're on like an ice skating rink, and you have to and all these people are like coming to get like ice cream from you or something. So you're handing out ice creams. So you can very easily hand out ice cream to people who are right next to you. But then they're like really crowded, and they have to like move away, and that's like diffusion. And so the rate with which I can hand ice cream out is based on just which empty people's hands are next to me, and how quickly I can get the ice cream to them. So, but that's not the electrical double layer. That's actually like diffusion.
Yeah, it would be cool to have. It's actually a kind of our thing to come up with analogies for stuff, right? Like like the music analogy, or the blind man elephant analogy for impedance. Like, I like this. For the electrochemical double layer, the one thing I can say that's odd and maybe counterintuitive, and it's like we've had many discussions about this over the years to kind of conceptualize it. It is extremely complex.
Yeah.
We sort of simplify it by saying that the electrode is polarized positively or negatively. It draws the oppositely charged ions in solution towards the surface, and those line up some distance from the surface, solvated ions. So the electrode is positively charged. So negatively charged chloride ions or sulfate ions or whatever will line up some distance away, close to it or whatever. And then that makes a capacitor, basically. What the situation with the double layer, which is kind of odd to say, and it took me a long time to like conceptualize this and think about this. Absolutely nothing happens unless that forms in solution. So you cannot even begin to hand out ice creams and have a Faradaic process and have an electron transfer occur until the double layer sets up. Now, thankfully, that happens really fast.
Yeah.
But there is absolutely an order to which this occurs. You will not have electron transfer until the double layer sets up. It is a simple phenomenological, thing involved in an electrochemistry experiment. It'll take some time, I think, to come up with like an analogy for why that's the case, or like a interesting way of like. I love that. I love that idea. Like,
Yeah, that's like a diffusion analogy for electron transfer,
Yeah.
but the double layer is basically just getting the ice cream carts to the front.
yeah.
That's
But
it. It's like
but
it's
it's like
established.
but it's like
you
it's
can hand
at
it
the
out.
surface, right? It's like you
Yeah.
have a situation that like time equals absolutely zero, right? Where electrode is in solution, ions and stuff is there, and there are hands that want to receive ice cream, which is like a Faraday
Yeah.
process can happen.
Yeah.
And it's like that can't actually occur until like a whole bunch of like children line up in front of your van.
Yeah. Just like super like
Super
crowded
crowded.
next
And
to
then
you.
you can hand the ice cream through them or over them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but they're getting in the way. Why are they required?
Yeah.
Right? Like from the analogy perspective.
Yeah, from the
I don't know
analogy
why
perspective.
they're required, but they are.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like
It's like I'm trying to,
it's like you can hand an ice cream to the person who's like right up front next to the truck, but homogeneous electron transfer is handing it to them some
Through.
distance away. You
Yeah.
can reach out to
You can
them
reach
if they have
through.
long arms. Right. So,
or you can like Hail Mary the ice cream all the way down.
well, that's the thing. We can't Hail Mary the ice cream because they still have to give you money, so they have to.
They can
have
Hail
to be
Mary the
able-
ice. They can Venmo it to me. That's homogeneous money transfer. Venmoing the money across the double layer. That's homogeneous money transfer. Oh, that's really bad.
Yeah.
There's your dad joke of the day.
Yeah. But yeah, the electrical double layer is very important for electrocatalysis. There are even deeper studies about like the structure of the solvents and how the molecule like gets in. There's some interesting you can actually get different like rate constants sometimes depending on the electrolyte. Which means the structure of the double layer matters a bit for electrocatalysis. I think like Frumkin studied that like back in Russia, like
in the 50s.
Yeah, in the 50s or something.
Well, I'll have to give this some thought. To be honest, I don't have a good like analogy. Ice cream or ice skating related analogy.
Yeah, I was thinking about
but now you're making me want to come up with one because we only really talk about it in like a cartoon form or that kind of a just the scientific terminology.
Yeah.
But like I love analogies where you like the potentiostat driving, pumping the brakes, hitting the accelerator. I love these kinds of analogies because we can all
very easily like
relate to them. Exactly. And they relate to things that so I'm going to think about this, Anton. I don't have a perfect analogy right now, but I will think about it and I will get to it. I promise at some point. And TT, I see your questions. We'll get to you in a moment.
Yeah. I just, it's like the analogy breaks down and then I become unhappy because I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's a case where the analogy doesn't work. I can't do anything.
The analogy doesn't have to be perfect.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
But I just don't know a good one. We got to think about that.
Yeah.
Until then, we can answer other questions. And Apurva says, is it always necessary for a best electrode in HER or OER to show lesser charge transfer resistance or a small semicircle in Nyquist?
Generally sounds good.
Yeah, I think so. With the added caveats, that's my favorite thing, which is that which potential you're applying when you're doing your impedance. So assuming you are applying the same over potential, let's just say for oxygen or hydrogen evolution reactions, and inducing that reaction to occur on whatever electrode, and then getting your impedance spectrum for that particular electrode at that applied potential. In general, I would say yes, in an overly simplified answer to you. You're looking for the smallest RCT. So as a general rule, if you're comparing electrode 1 versus electrode 2, right, for HER, and you apply minus 0.1 versus RAG or whatever, like 100 millivolts of overpotential below zero. I'm just making up some numbers on the fly here to illustrate my point. And you do impedance on electrode 1 and electrode 2, and electrode 1 has a smaller charge transfer semicircle than electrode 2. It's probably fair to say electrode 1's better. It means it has a lower resistance. It's faster kinetics. It's doing the HER better, right? So generally the answer to your question is yes, but again, just be careful that you're comparing what we would say apples to apples, right? We're the same, like, over potential and conditions and things like, because you can just like apply a much lower potential and on electrode 2 and get a really small semicircle, but it's like, well, you're driving the reaction more. It's not the same situation. So make sure you're comparing um, similar conditions, let's just say. But in general, I think the answer is yes for the most part.
I think the next question is from Priya. Priya asks, how the differential pulse voltammetry DPV step potential and pulse width influence the resolution and sensitivity of the peak. Also, could you explain how to choose these values effectively? This is like your second, like third favorite question. So we can break this down a little bit.
I actually like this question.
Yeah.
Why would I hate this question?
No, because I've always thought that you're always just like, you just have to try stuff.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me
no.
clarify my cantankerous nature. There are certainly times where the answer is trial and error is going to guide you to like what the things should be. But I like this question because it's it's actually a great question.
It's great.
These are hard things to determine. How high should I pulse in DPV? How long should I wait? Blah, 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 all those things. This is a great question. Unfortunately, I think here's what I'd say. Unfortunately, sometimes the answer is like, you just got to try stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But the question of the impedance potential you should be at drives me insane for other reasons.
Yeah.
And that's not because,
right.
so I won't belabor it. Anyway, please continue.
Sure. So I'm going to break this down into kind of, so remember the current that's measured in DPV, is a differential current. So it's always like I believe it's like a final minus an initial.
Yeah, it's the pulse one minus the baseline one or whatever. I don't know what you call it.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's you would take this guy, and I think it's subtracted from this guy.
The next one.
Then this guy subtracted by this guy. So you're always looking at a differential between those guys. And then there's the pulse width, which is just, this, I think it's just this distance here. So those are the two parameters. There's this time element between these, and then there's this final minus initial. And so what gives you the highest resolution, right? Because you ultimately want to get a peak that's like very nice and well defined and stuff like that. The way that I think about this is several fold. When you are collecting this data, the final minus the initial, you are looking at two different, this is basically happening at two different potentials. And actually, I think, sorry, I have the wrong axis here. Let me correct that. This is supposed to be
time, right?
Yeah, it's voltage and time. So, sorry. So this is time, and this is voltage. I'm like, oh, why does this look weird? So the voltage that these two guys are at is very different. And you can think of it almost from, say, like in a CV or a Nernstein response, that if you are, so let's actually just look at this is the current, differential current versus the voltage. Here, when you have zero current difference, there is no Faradaic reaction that's occurring, right? So you're very far from like the E naught, sort of say. Let's say the E naught's like up here or something. You're really far away from it. So the difference between this current and this current is zero because there's no reaction that's occurring. It's only when you're, say, in this region over here, where you're now at a spot where really the potential is closer to like, the E naught's actually here, relatively speaking. Well, I'm just going to give this a little prime. So this is like the E0 prime. And when you go from here to here, you are actually inducing a change, a significant change in the amount of Faradaic current. So this height of the step needs to be, I keep putting a current. I don't put the potential. This potential, if it's big enough, then the difference between these will be bigger. And that way you'll actually get, that's why you actually get a current, because the difference between these two is really big. So the step potential, in a way, if it's sufficiently large enough, will give you a bigger change in the current. Of course, you can have problems, because if you make it too big, then it's just going to be like everything is going to be ridiculously big. This is going to become super broad, because there's going to be a much larger voltage range that you're sampling between, where you're getting current changes. So you're not going to get a well-resolved peak that way. Similarly, if the change is very small, like if the change is maybe like a few millivolts, you're not, this is going to become really, really flat. You're not going to get that big a change in the current. So to Neil's point, you absolutely have to do some trial and error, because you don't know if you're going to get this small guy, or if you're going to get this like super big guy, super broad guy. So that is what the step potential is. It needs to be sufficiently big enough that you go from a non-redox state to a redox state. And then, of course, when you're here, when you're in this region here, you again kind of have a like almost no that's where you get the biggest difference in the current. But as you're on your way back down, well, the potential difference is actually like you're only making a very small potential difference, but in the negative direction. This guy is larger than this guy, so you have almost like a negative slope. So that explains how you can think conceptually about the potential and the step potential that you have to apply in DPV. The time here between steps really has to do with removing background current. And generally speaking, what I like to do is there's kind of this rule I like to think about. It's like 5 times RC is the time it takes to completely charge and discharge the electrical double layer. So this gives you the time roughly to fully charge and fully discharge the double layer, which should be the amount of time that you give between pulses. So this is something you can calculate. You can look at the solution resistance and the capacitance of your electrochemical cell and use that as a rough gauge as to how long do you want this to pulse, so that you don't have non-Faradaic or you want to minimize non-Faradaic processes from occurring. It doesn't have to be exactly 5, but it needs to be some factor of RC. And generally, this is depends on the size, depends on the capacitance, depends on the resistance. But I usually like to think this is in the hundreds of microseconds for analytical experiments, typically, which DPV is, the analytical experiment. But that's how you think about it. That's how you think about the time. You can use this 5RC for the charging and discharging of the double layer. And then you think about your E naught and the difference between here and here, and what current that's going to give you. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Brian.
Trial and error.
Trial and error.
With all of that actual.
Well, yes. With all the reasoning behind it, you still have to trial and error it a bit. But you can think about it.
That's a good synopsis, though.
Mm-hmm.
Sapanta apparently saw us at ECS. I think that was last week.
Yeah, that was at you, because ECS.
That's right, in Montreal. So if I did see you in Montreal, then it was nice to meet you as well. But I apparently forgot that ACS was earlier this year, so I'm just a mess with timing. So, but it was nice to see anybody at Montreal that I did see. Apparently, I was there, and that's a me problem. But anyway,
that's all good.
Nicholas says, I'm working with 3 different molecules in non-aqueous solution. In CV, they present a non-reversible process in anodic region. And in cathodic region, one of them presents a reversible reduction. Okay, but in square wave, all of them seem to have a reversible reduction. Can I conclude that the reduction is reversible even though the CV? No, not necessarily. Another thing with the square wave to be aware of is the same thing that Alex just talked about with DPV. Square wave is a differential current. So it's not the same waveform as DPV, but it's similar, and it's square, hence the name. But in the same way that Alex just talked about iterating and trial and error and some of the thought behind, I'm not going to reiterate because there's similar discussions for square wave as it is for DPV. I don't want to sort of talk forever, and it's too much the same, I guess I'd say.
Very similar.
Yeah. They are very similar. DPV is a little better at getting background current because of the difference between the pulse width and the background width. It's a little more adept at peak position determination. But my point being that it's possible through any pulse technique, square wave included, to trick yourself into finding a peak that's not there, because it's a differential current, and so it's just a change. I'm not trying to say inappropriate or like incorrect. I mean, it's a lot of it's trial and error, like we just said, but like some particular selection of the width of the potential, of the pulse height, of the timing, can lead to a differential current change that appears to go up and then down or whatever, but it's like, it's just a consequence of like, oh, well, I picked too wide of a potential. And so it's like my peak and my CV is here. And it's like, if my window is following that, I'll get a peak. But if my window is too small, I won't get much of a peak. Or if it's too big, I might get a peak. I might get like, I know it's hard to like, to illustrate this outside of the context of an experiment, but like, it might just be a artifact of the parameters of your square wave experiment that's showing you a peak. A simple CV that's not giving you a peak is probably a good indication that there's nothing Faradaic happening, because in that one it's much simpler. You're sweeping the potential, and you're not getting, like in your non-reversible anodic region, you're not. So I'm a non-reversible process in anodic region. So I'm guessing, so like there's an anodic peak and then there's no corresponding cathodic peak. So it's like if you sweep negatively and you don't get a cathodic peak, there's no process, like there's no reduction current. There's nothing happening there. And so the only way you'll get a current to show up at those potentials is if you have a differential, because of the choice of where you're subtracting. But fundamentally, there is no actual, the differential current is not the same as the current, right? Like small changes in the current between voltage 1 and voltage 2 can lead you to believe that there's current happening at some potential, but that's not. It's an artifact. It's an artifact of your experiment. So that's what I suspect may be happening. I'd be very cautious, unless it's just like there is something happening, but it's small and only detectable through a pulse technique. That's another situation, and that's tricky. The pulse technique can enhance a peak, for instance, if it's a small one, because of the differential. But it's tricky. It can cause some features to appear that aren't Faradaic processes. So it's both. This is why pulse techniques are perhaps a little less popular in the main in general than CV. And I think it's because they are almost equally as susceptible to like clarifying peaks and like enhancing features that are hard to see with CV as they are possibly misleading in the same way. So I would just urge you some caution in that, is kind of what I would say as a general advice.
I would also make a recommendation. I would do a scan rate study.
Yeah, that's a
with
good idea.
CV. Just like if you really have irreversible reactions, then you won't see it at fast scan rates. If you continue to go faster and faster, within some reason, you may hit some problems.
On the speed of the process.
Depends on the speed of the process. You may just have a very kinetically slow reversible reaction, and as you go to faster scan rates, the reverse wave will start to show up. But if it's truly irreversible and you've chemically, converted it into something else and it's just disappeared, you'll be competing with that chemical process. So a scan rate study, I would do a scan rate study too.
Scan faster and faster and see if you see any differences in the peak position and appearance. In your CV. That's a good idea. Yeah. Because that might invalidate or validate the appearance in your square wave, and you'll also probably need to iterate on some of the square wave parameters, as I said. So,
yes.
okay.
Do we want to talk about? Looks like TT has a couple.
Yeah.
Looks like fundamental how to learn echem
Well,
questions.
some of this is like an existential problem here. So TT says, I'm still a newbie in electrochemistry. I don't know how to interpret EIS, CV, galvanostatic charge, discharge, how to fit the data and draw them and their significance. So no small matter. What do you recommend doing to learn more, please? And then sort of following up, where should I look to learn more and understand? I need to have a comprehensive understanding because it's so disappointing to work without any prior knowledge that I want to drop out of the master's.
And
then what do you recommend as electrochemistry 101, especially the electrochemical analysis part, where to read and study? You're not bothering us. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
This is called Ask Us Anything About Electrochemistry for a reason. Okay. So the short answer is a difficult one. It's hopefully you're in a lab with other lab mates. Electrochemistry is difficult. Like you're not, I mean, at the very least, I can offer you sympathy and understanding that we've been through this for sure. And everybody who steps foot into a lab for the first time doing electrochemistry can be overwhelmed. It's a lot. It's hard to understand what's happening, why you're doing what you're doing. I was fortunate to have an amazing advisor who whipped me into shape, as well as some friends in my lab who were willing to, guide me here and there. And it wasn't like, I did all of my research with someone else standing there, but it was like, it's little things like, oh, I have electrodes and I have solution and I have a potentiostat and I have a computer and software. And it's like, there's a lot of stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, what am I doing with all of this? And it's like, it's overwhelming at first. There's, as with most things in life, and this is more of like deep thoughts, life talk here, but like, there's no way out but through. You have to face it head on. I know it feels like tough. You want to quit. It's hard to know, but like, you're never going to learn until you just face it head on and try. As a general rule, that doesn't tell you where to go for the 101 stuff and where to learn. I understand that, right? I'm just saying that as a general rule, I can relate to the idea that I want to quit. I did want to quit at one point when I was doing my PhD. Thankfully I didn't, but hopefully there's someone else in your lab who's doing a master's or a PhD or as a postdoc or something, who can like offer you a little bit of guidance, like a little bit of electrochemistry 101 here and there. Obviously the simple answer are some textbooks like Bard and Faulkner or the Heinemann book. I always forget the name, but
Understanding Voltammetry by Compton is also a good book too. I've been looking at that book as well.
Yeah. This YouTube channel, shamelessly here. This guy makes lots of videos, like 10-minute video on what cyclic voltammetry is, similar on impedance. I have webinars where I talk, it might be higher level perhaps, but I have my impedance webinar where I go through the whole process and how to interpret it and how to draw it. Galvanostatic charge discharge is a whole different kind of thing. If you're studying batteries, I could talk endlessly about that. That's what I did my research on. It's if you have a specific question about it, it's hard to answer. Like, how do I interpret GCD? I mean, it's a lot, and how to
interpret the EIS.
Yeah, how to interpret EIS is a lot too. But I mean, that's why I did a 5-part webinar on it. And it's like, what, 7 hours worth of content, like, and I had to cut stuff. Like, it's not, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Our YouTube channel can hopefully be a resource for you. I know there's not a lot of people doing what we're doing. Hopefully we're being a useful resource in that regard. Textbooks are only so useful if the practicality of it doesn't, you can read about voltage and current or whatever, and then you're in the lab with a platinum wire and a weird looking disc with a plastic shroud, and you're like, what do I do? The translation from reading something to like being in the lab and having gloves and a lab coat on and goggles and pressing buttons, there's a disconnect there. There's always a disconnect there. That's why you need to have lab mates who hopefully like just tell you, like, here, clip this thing, whatever. See, I have lab mates. Most of them are done with the experimental research now in the phase of writing. They were amazing, but when I met them before they were done. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you can try to be a little bold and say like, "Hey, I know you're writing your thesis, but can you spend an hour with me in the lab next Tuesday and just like talk me through some of this?" That's what I would do. It depends on your personality type. If you're sort of shy or,
Mhm.
maybe they're not so friendly or they're really busy or maybe they're not there. Like, I don't know. I would ask someone for help. Like when I was learning how to do battery stuff, I had to learn everything on my own and I was also confused. And I had a friend, who got me a contact of someone outside and they like kind of answered some of my questions, but they weren't willing to answer all my questions, and I had to like push my way through and try. And then, I went to when I was at conferences and stuff, I would try to I'd go to a talk and then I'd try to find the person after the talk and just ask them a few questions to just gain a little nugget of information here. And I think you'll be surprised how many people are willing to talk if you just are aggressive. I don't mean that in a mean way or like a inappropriate way, but like people at conferences people love to talk about their research,
Yeah.
right? People love to talk about themselves. And if they think that, I don't know, I'm not trying to be nasty or anything, but like if they can, if they think that they'll like, you can, like, hey, you're so good at this. Can you show me? It's like you're boost their ego, and you'll get them to like spend some time and show you how to do stuff or like, and I get how it's almost embarrassing. You're kind of like, oh, I don't really know how to like, where do I put my electrode? Where do I put this stuff? Like, well, if no one's ever showed you, don't be embarrassed. Like, what do I do with the counter? What's a counter electrode? Where do I put the working electrode? What is a working electrode? Like, those seem like stupid questions, but well, if I were entering the field of like biomedical research, I'd have to be like, I don't know, what's a cell? Like I don't, I'm just, you know what I mean? Like I'm new to
Yeah.
this field. Like, well, I don't know what the terminology means yet either.
Mhm.
Like, don't try not to be embarrassed. Try not to let that get in your way. Like, don't be afraid to ask people for help. I guess and as a general piece of advice for us, we do this every week, obviously, for a couple hours on Fridays at this time. I don't know, obviously, where you are in the world or what time it is for you. But and it's hard for us to answer, how do you analyze EIS or how do you analyze GCD? But like, ask a specific question and I'll try to give you a specific answer. Like, okay, well, I know impedance. Well, what does this specific thing mean? And I'll try to answer that for you. We can do that in this forum, this live stream, for instance. But I don't know if you have any other kind of advice to give. I know it's
Yeah, no, I think you covered all the important kind of, you know, philosophical things also about just like it's going to be hard. Like nobody it's weird. I think electrochemistry of almost all the subjects in like the sciences, it is because people either come with chemistry backgrounds, engineering backgrounds, material science backgrounds, and none of those really cover electrochemistry in any like great level of detail. And they
Mhm.
think about units very differently. Like fundamentally, what is happening is confusing. And then the interpretation of data, your comment about like
Mhm.
how do I analyze EIS, CV, GCD, is you have to like you have to collect and look at a lot of CV,
Mhm.
EIS, and GCD data. It's like every single system is different, and just thinking about myself, like I could not interpret like Neil and I can look at like Neil can look at EIS and CV, and I can look at CV data, and I can tell you half a dozen things about the system just by looking at it. But that's because we've looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of really strange CVs, impedance spectra, things like that.
Yeah.
You have the advantage of like having a well controlled system and being able to at least like do this a few times and play, adjust a parameter, see what that does.
Yeah.
Um, I think one thing I would also say, I mean, it's good to. I've always found that if you really work very hard at trying to understand a concept and you're having a hard time like getting it, um the thing I just remember very clearly, like I was learning organic chemistry and there was like office hours with the professor, and like I went in, a couple other people went in, And someone just came in and asked the professor, like, I don't get this. And that was it. And like the professor was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like what about it do you not get? But
Yeah.
like when I asked him a question, like it was a nomenclature question. I was like, well, I have a question. If you have a hydrocarbon that's like this long and you put this functional group on it, you have this functional group on it, these functional groups have the same, whatever. How do I determine which one has the priority in the naming structure? He's like, ah, yes, this is a clear question.
Yeah.
So you'll annoy your advisor and your lab mates if you if you just say I don't get it. But if
Yeah,
you've
I
done
think that's
some work,
really good advice, actually. Like,
yeah,
okay, you're probably feeling like, I don't understand any of this.
yeah,
I don't, whatever. Okay. Even though it's tough, try to identify among the 5 million things cooking around your head that are confusing and kind of scary, one question,
yeah,
and formulate that and ask us here,
yeah,
or ask your lab mate, or ask your advisor. Like, I don't know. I don't know why there's a peak. I don't even know
mhm,
what CV means. I don't even know what the C means. I don't know what the V means. I don't know what a working electrode is. I don't know what a counter electrode. I don't know anything. Let's just say you have totally no knowledge. You're like in over your head. You're scared and confused,
mhm,
right? Find one question to ask. Like, go to your lab mate. It's like, can you just please explain, like, why do I need a counter electrode?
yeah,
What is its purpose? Or ask us and we'll
yeah,
explain it. Whatever. The
mhm,
point is, like, think of one specific question. I promise what's going to happen is that you have like 50,000 questions in your head. Just pick a needle out of the haystack, right? Or pick a coin out of the jar of 5 million coins of questions that you need answered, and just get that one answered.
mhm,
Understand it, and it's a specific thing. And then what's going to happen is that, number one, is that the satisfaction of understanding one little bit is going to lead you to decrease your stress level.
mhm,
First of all, you're going to be like, oh, I think I get it. At
yeah,
least I understand what a counter electrode is. Number one is you're going to forget a lot of the other questions that are driving you insane. You'll think of them later, and then you can ask those in
yeah,
time, one at a time,
yeah,
as you get them.
mhm,
But also, the understanding of one of these specific things, you just narrow it down. Just think of one thing that you really think would be good if you knew.
mhm,
That understanding is, oh, well, maybe that means and you're going to figure out why some of the other things that you don't understand are. It'll help you put things into place,
yeah,
right? You will, I promise, like, start figuring things out little by little, but just like think of one at a time, ask a specific question. If you ask a specific question to your advisor, to your lab mate, or to us,
mhm,
right? It's a digestible thing. But to your point, like, if you just like, I don't get
yeah,
it,
yeah,
they're gonna be like, well, I don't know how to help you.
yeah.
It's too big, it's too
It's
broad.
too, yeah,
Narrow your focus and figure out one thing at a time. Just take it step by step. Learn what a counter electrode is. Learn what a working electrode is. Learn what the double layer is. Learn what cyclic voltammetry is. Just learn like one thing at a time.
mhm,
Learn why you put electrolyte in the beaker. Learn why the alligator clip is on the potentiostat. Like, learn one little stupid thing at a time, and
mhm,
I promise it'll start to come together.
yeah. And showing effort that like you didn't just like give up immediately when it's
Yeah.
like, ah, I don't get it. This is all. What's a kind of like? It's like, hey man, I've been reading all these papers and people are using like platinum and graphite and platinum and then a rod, and it's like why is it, why are they choosing this one versus another one? Like, if you can
Yeah.
pinpoint,
Yeah.
the more specific you can get the question and showing people that like this is the part that's not making sense, it'll be easier for them to answer the question
Right.
and hopefully
And the
fill
knowledge
in
will
the
be
gap.
like an avalanche for you. You're going to start
Yeah.
understanding one thing, it leads you to understanding another thing.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of interconnected threads within electrochemistry, as with any discipline.
Yeah. And I'll add one more thing, which is you're a master's student right now. Actually, I'll add two more things. If you're in the U.S., Pine does workshops as well. So in addition to webinars and YouTube content, I always encourage people to attend our workshops as well,
Mhm.
to get real like hands-on experience. And then the last thing is uh, like Neil and I are still learning stuff. Like
Yeah.
like I'm actually going to like take a course on electrochemistry next week. So like I am still learning a lot of things about electrochemistry. And I think every year we think we're getting like so much closer to figuring out how we can do electrochemistry without a reference electrode.
I'm gonna
because
do
we
it.
Keep
I'm gonna figure it out.
we keep getting closer, but like I'm still learning
We're
like
not getting
tons of
closer.
stuff. So you may feel like you need to learn everything super super fast, but it does take time. Like, and even after, like, if you go for a PhD, even after your PhD, like, you may feel like, man, I really don't know anything, and it's like, I don't know, it's true. I think about it as like,
I've had a PhD for more than 10 years, and
yeah,
there's days where I feel like I don't know anything.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's days where I am looked at as the expert in a certain topic.
yeah,
A lot
yeah,
of times on this very YouTube event,
yeah,
and it still baffles me. And I have
yeah,
been a PhD electrochemist for more than 10 years.
yeah.
So don't let the imposter syndrome seriously get you
Mhm.
down. It's real. But also, if it's real for you, it's real for everyone.
Yeah.
Except for like the most arrogant person in the world who just thinks they know everything. And I'll tell you, that person doesn't know everything. They
Yeah.
just think they do. So we're all in it. We're all,
Yeah. We're all trying to
we're all
we're all
trying to understand
trying
stuff.
to make sense
But
of this.
that spirit of humility and recognizing that you don't know everything, the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. Okay. So
Yeah.
don't be put off by the fact that you don't know a lot. Because the
Yeah.
more that you do learn, the more you'll realize there's more things that you can look at it as an opportunity to learn more, right?
Yeah.
But you have to have the right spirit about it, or the
Yeah.
right approach, or whatever you want to say, right? So anyway, that's a good psychotherapy
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
side note. But I hope that was at least helpful, commiseration for you, TT. So best of luck to you. And like I said, if you have specific questions, ask us. We'll try to answer for you. But I think we'll move on for now.
Yeah, we'll move on. We have at least about 15 minutes or so. We can try to answer
Yeah.
some other
So
questions.
I'm not sure we can totally do this one. Judy says, how do I solve Faraday equations? And what's the purpose of electrolyte bridges in electrolytic and galvanic cells? So I don't know if I want to solve the Faraday equations. That's probably more of a,
Don't know how to do that at all.
I mean, I probably did that 15 years ago at some point in a class. To be honest, it's a little beyond my ability at the moment to do the derivation or something like that. But very briefly, and descriptively, Faraday's laws or Faraday's equations are ways that connect current with material. Effectively, it's basically that in a nutshell. It's connecting amps, electrons flowing with how much material is formed from the redox process. And that's basically what Faraday's law or Faraday's laws are. But I'm not going to really do the derivation there. But speaking about the electrolyte bridges in these cells, they're ways to complete the circuit, so to speak. So in a galvanic or an electrolytic cell, perhaps the most common or famous example you have is a zinc and copper one. So you'll have two separated chambers or beakers or whatever you want to say, right? And I always screw up which side is which, but one side has like zinc in it, zinc 2+, and the other side has copper, like copper sulfate or whatever. And one side has a copper. This does not look like copper. Copper's not green, but whatever. That's the color I chose, and I'm sticking with it. And then I probably should have chose red for copper because copper is closer to red.
Well, certain I think
copper can put
oxidation
green
states of copper
could be green or blue.
Yeah.
Anyway, I always just pick different colors to kind of make it nice looking. But,
yeah.
Well, anyway, we connect these two here, and again, I always screw up which direction, but basically, which one plates, which one releases? I always forget.
Oh god,
I know. Now I'm
well, it depends on the
putting
potential.
you on the spot. No, but like this is a galvanic cell. It happens.
Oh, spontaneously.
I always forget which one of them plates and one of them. It depends on the potential.
All right, let's look at.
No, it's fine. I don't want to put you on the spot. I always forget.
I'm just gonna look up.
See, look, I'm an electrochemist and I forget. I just forget. One of them happens and one of them plates and one of them dissolves.
Oh, is it?
The point of the story, however, I'll let Alex sort of look that up,
okay.
is that we have electrons flowing in one direction, for example. Let's just pretend it's going this way, okay? And so what this means is that copper, for instance, is losing electrons and oxidizing. Electrons are traveling from the copper wire to the zinc. where the zinc is reducing. So this would mean zinc is plating. It's either that or it's going the other direction, which is to say zinc is oxidizing and copper is reducing and plating. So the point of the salt bridge is that if this happened like this, like I drew, right? We have two separate containers. There's no connection between these two solutions. And electrons are flowing from one to the other. We would have a buildup of charge from right to left. This is not sustainable, nor will this actually physically happen because there's no balance of charge. And so what we have to do is provide some sort of, in some cases, it's like a cloth or like a tube, right? That connects these two. What is
Copper
it?
plates.
Copper plate. I had it backwards. Of course I had it backwards.
I'm just looking at it. It's like, oh, the reduction of Cu2 plus to Cu has a positive potential, and
So it goes the other way. Of course I should.
and plating
Yes.
plating zinc has a negative potential. So it's like,
Okay, so I had it backwards. Exactly. I should have known it. Copper's the one that plates. That makes sense.
Yeah, but it's all good. I
You
mean, I
know,
didn't know the answer.
Whatever. Like
You know,
science is irrelevant. Who
TT,
cares?
you know, I hope
See?
this doesn't give you a bad impression of our electrochemical
I hope this gives you a good
knowledge.
impression because I don't even know off the top of my head what this is, and I'm just making it up as I go. All right, whatever. The point is now current is moving from left to right. Okay, zinc is dissolving; it's oxidizing. The zinc. This reaction would be zinc goes to zinc 2 plus 2 electrons, right? And on this side, copper 2 plus 2 electrons is going to copper metal. Copper is plating on itself, basically, right? Well, you can't have this happen. There's just all the charges moving from this way to this way. There's no balance here. It's just not. It isn't physically. If you can do this, you can get two beakers. You can put zinc sulfate in one, copper sulfate in the other. You can put a zinc wire in one and a copper wire in the other. You can connect them with a potentiostat, with a wire, whatever. Nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. You need to have either negative charge moving in the other direction or positive charge moving in the same direction. And so the way that happens is ions in solution have to balance the charge. The migration of ions basically balances the charge so this can occur. And so effectively what that means is like this, there's sulfate in here, right? It's SO4 2 minus or whatever. Let's just say there's copper sulfate here and there's sulfate or whatever nitrate on this side, right? 2 minus. And so these ions will migrate in this direction. And so there is a balance of charge. So negatives are moving from left to right. And so negatives are moving also from right to left. Or positive, some of the zinc ions might make their way into the copper, and that will happen as well. It's the same, but the movement of charge, negatively or positively, as the case may be, must occur. And this happens in a single, this is a galvanic cell, but in a single solution, this also happens between the working and the counter electrode, for instance, or whatever. You have a oxidation or reduction happening in one electrode, and you have an electric field or migration of ions in solution to counteract that and complete the cell and the charge balance. So that is the bridge, the salt bridge, or whatever you call it, electrolyte bridge, I guess. In a galvanic or an electrolytic cell, it's required to balance the charge. Otherwise, there's an endless buildup of charge, and it doesn't. It's the neutrality is not satisfied.
Right. So that was Judy's question,
Yes.
and then
Karen is next.
Karen is next.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the live stream. Is there a statistical value that we can use to quantify how well an equivalent circuit fits experimental data? Visually, I guess that's supposed to be EIS data, but
No, EC, electrochemical circuit.
Oh, electrochemical circuit fits the Nyquist plot very well, but not the Bode plot.
Yeah.
So actually, Ashwin answered this this question actually with a comment. Hi, Karen. The statistical value which you can use is called chi-squared, and usually a value of 10 to the minus 5 or value of 10 to the minus 6.
See you laughing.
It's a good one. I can't help
it. As chi-squared.
Chi-squared.
Did you say chi's I shared?
I shared. No. Yeah. So
when we can talk about it.
It's like inside joke here.
I know. I just know that you don't. It's like we all have our.
We have our thing. We have our cross to bear.
So,
let me pull up a slide so I don't strangle myself or do something untoward. I hate chi-squared. I hate it so much. I'm sorry. Your question is fine, Karen. This is a me problem.
Yeah.
Just so you're clear, this is a me problem, and Alex is laughing, and it's funny. Chi-squared in general, there's slightly different calculations, but it's something like this. You have a fit and you have experimental data. Effectively, the statistical analysis is something like the summed squares of the distances between the fit and your data. So you can see I drew black lines showing the distances between each of these red points and the line. So the line is the fit. The red dots here, for instance, are the data points. And so the distance between those two is like the error, right? And you add all that up and aggregate that makes it chi-squared. Precisely the number chi-squared should be depends on all of the things, the software you're using, exactly how many data points you have, a lot of stuff. I reject the idea that it ought to be 10 to the minus 5 or 10 to the minus 6 or 1,000 or 10 to the minus 5 billion. It really depends on the software you're using. It's not easy to give a number specifically for that because it's highly dependent on what your software is and in your specific circuit you're fitting. But generally speaking, this is chi-squared. This x that looks like an x. This is chi. It's the Greek letter chi. That is the sort of generally speaking error statistic with data. And then as a general advice is be very weary if the Nyquist fits well, but the Bode plot does not. Be very careful with that, and vice versa. You could have the Bode plot fit really nicely, but the Nyquist not. It's very important to try as best you can to observe both Bode and Nyquist plots while circuit fitting, because you can be tricked into thinking your fit is good when it is not. Mm-hmm. It is important that both show some degree of cohesion, I guess. And there's a lot more I could say about that. It's I know I'm being a little broad here, and there's a lot of specific examples, but there are times where you can be very fooled, especially with the Nyquist. But the direction that you have described, where the Nyquist plot is good and the Bode plot is bad, in my opinion, is more dangerous than the other way. If the Bode plot is good but the Nyquist plot is bad, there's a better chance that the fit is okay, and there's just a couple of scaling graphical things with the Nyquist plot. But if your Nyquist plot looks pretty good at a quick glance, and the Bode plot does not, that's a warning sign. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
the Nyquist plot does not show frequencies. Yeah. So what looks good on the Nyquist plot can fool you, because it's just a line going through your points, but the line consists of points, and those may not line up precisely where you think they are. It's hard to explain this.
Well, if you take just a very simple like RC circuit in parallel, you get like a semicircle. The shape of the semicircle, if it was perfect,
let me show you that.
What you're saying is yeah, perfect. It's like it doesn't matter what the capacitance value is. The shape is just based on the right. R value. Yeah. Which means C could be anything, and it looks fine in the Nyquist plot, right? But the Bode plot will be all over the place.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Here is the simplest possible thing: it's one semicircle with a leading resistor. Mm-hmm. If I change the leading resistor, the whole thing moves left and right. It's pretty obvious if that changes, right? However, look at my Nyquist. I know there's no fitted data. This is just let's just say this is like a perfect fit, right? Look at my Nyquist plot, not changing at all, unless I go to the very extremes of the values. Mm-hmm. It's a semicircle. And maybe my semicircle looks like that. It looks like it's fitting perfectly, but look at how much the Bode plot is changing. This is why your situation can be very dangerous. You can say, oh, my Nyquist plot looks fine, but the Bode plot looks terrible. The peak doesn't line up for whatever reason, because the Nyquist plot doesn't always change as visually as the Bode plot does. And you can be tricked into thinking that your thing fits and it doesn't. So be very cautious. I would try to force yourself to get both to be in compliance, fitting, looking roughly as good as possible, but definitely don't neglect the Bode plot when it comes to getting those fit. And look at the contours in the phase angle. The phase angle will often have contours like dips and peaks for each sort of process that's occurring. Really try to make sure that your phase angle Bode plot fit follows the contours as best as possible. That's a really big one, because if it doesn't, it means you're probably not capturing all the processes that are occurring. You might need to change your electrochemical circuit. But really follow the phase angle contours if you can. That's my advice. So
yeah,
see, we have a lot of questions. Of course, they pop up at the last minute.
Yeah, I think let's see, I'm just going through. I think Amaka, I think, is next. Just
Ashwin had
Ashwin.
I think
another
there was a
question.
question.
Oh, yeah,
he
sorry,
answered Karen's question, but said a question: is modeling and fitting the same in EIS? Is really modeling like collecting whole cell data at different state of charge, temperature, cycle life? But how are we going to deconvolute it to relevant RM? What's RM?
Don't know. Is it a battery term?
Might be. Well, if it's talking about state of charge. Modeling and fitting, is modeling and fitting the same in impedance?
Well, isn't modeling's coming up with the circuit?
Well, if you're talking about circuit fitting, then modeling is coming up with the electric equivalent circuit.
The equivalent circuit.
But if you're talking about modeling, like on a general sense, like on a first principles modeling, that's
DFT modeling.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
It's a whole nother thing.
I guess I don't. How are we going to deconvolute it relative to? I don't know what RMs.
I don't know what RMs are.
Sorry. Yeah, I think. Is it really modeling like collect whole cell data? If you're going to collect like all these different data at different states of charge, temperature, cycle life, and all these kinds of things, and try to do modeling, that's great. And you can do, for example, empirical kinds of modeling per se. For example, get impedance data at different temperatures, different state of health, state of charge, different life cycles. You can get impedance data and you can correlate some of that. That's like modeling, but it's more empirical, which what I mean is like, you're not saying like, here's the equation for charge transfer and here's how energy is moving and here's how particles are moving. You're just saying like Z is equal to 12 when it's at 100 degrees. And then when I drop it to 50 degrees, Z goes to 9. Like, that's like, why? Who cares? It's empirical. Like, it's just looking at why numbers change when other things change. And that's accepted. That's fine. Like, you can do that. That's a form of modeling per se. That's it. We call it empirical because it's based on how the numbers change with different settings. That's also something you can do for sure. But it isn't like deconvoluting per se, because you're not like gaining a lot of fundamental information, I guess. But that's what I can say about that, I guess. I know we're getting pretty close to the end here. A lot of nice comments. We appreciate everybody here.
Yeah.
Did you want to? Amaka has a bit. We can try to do that. And...
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't know exactly how to answer this. Could you explain concentration polarization versus activation polarization? The way I interpret this, and I have no idea if this is right, but it's like, I just think about the Nernst equation, and that you can change the potential by just changing the concentration of species.
Look, we got to 2 hours and you almost didn't get to show the Nernst equation.
I know, I can't possibly
but we got it.
We got
the Nernst equation in just under the wire.
Yeah. So when you like polarize an electrode about some E value, really it's it's based on the activities of the concentrations of your redox species. So you can polarize an electrode by changing the concentration or activity of your oxidized or reduced species, or you can go the other way around and then use a potentiostat or a power source to change E, which therefore changes the relative concentration of your oxidized or reduced species. That's what I think you're talking about, but I actually don't really know for sure what you mean by concentration polarization versus activation polarization.
To me, that's what I read it as.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, and I think the answer is exactly as you said. By the Nernst equation, definitionally, potential and concentrations are linked.
Yeah.
So you can change one and affect the other, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And so I think that makes sense to me. Oh, RM is raw materials used for making a cell due to length of life. Yeah, I understand making it short. I just, and we deal with this a lot, Ashwin. It's like there's a lot of acronyms and we know a lot of them, and then from time to time we sort of get confused. But so you were just talking about relevant to raw materials. You're going to deconvolute it relative to raw materials. Yeah, some of that is just as simple as multiple experiments testing the raw material. It's an iterative thing. Like you make a cell or a system with just the raw material, test it, see what it looks like. Then you make a whole system, test it, see what it looks like, and look at the difference. Sometimes that's as simple as what that is there. But
I mean, again, in EIS, you can also get like multiple semicircles that are related to like the anode, cathode, or electrolyte. So you can
sometimes
maybe
EIS does allow you to deconvolute in that way for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes you can do that. But yeah, what I was talking about was more of an empirical, I guess, thing. But anyway.
Okay. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah.
I guess we can try this last question.
By question about electrolytes.
Moving you in. Yeah, I think so. I don't
know what the numbers are in front here, but
yeah, I kind of ignore them. But
98/5.
Yeah, 8/5. That's a well-known 5.
That's right.
Can you explain why KOH was chosen as an electrolyte for the capacitor and not sulfuric acid? And he has a couple other questions. Can you explain why KCl, when used as an electrolyte for capacitors, the membrane burns when measuring CVCCD for many cycles? And then he has a couple other ones.
If after 200 cycles, the capacitance retention is 95%. But after the next 10 cycles, it drops rapidly to 4%. Current capacitance retention suddenly drops 91%. What happened? Capacitor I measured using 2 electrode method. You appear to be hitting the limit of your material. I mean, it's a good question in general. I mean, the point here is like, something irreversible has happened to limit the life cycle of your material. I guess I don't know how to answer this question properly. Like, it's something happened, but I don't know. I'm looking at your data, like what precisely happened. I mean, this is why you do the test that you're doing, which is to say, degradation occurs through repeated cycling. Always 200 doesn't seem like a lot of cycles, but you're probably testing some new material and you're discovering that it doesn't have tremendous life, or excuse me, something might have delaminated. You're working at a capacitor, you probably have a film of some kind, or you have a something of that nature. So perhaps after enough repeated cycling, something just delaminated, or started falling off, or flaked off of your electrode, and so all of a sudden it's just gone, and so you lost most of your material. That's what it sounds like to me. Like material fell off, really, like physically fell off. It's very possible, although I'm not sure I totally know without seeing data and seeing your setup, but that's just my guess. I don't know if you can add anything to that.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
Because you would imagine if this was like a linear process, it's like, oh, well, you would slowly see from cycle 1 or 2 to 200, like, oh, it would go down by like a tiny fraction of a percent. But now after 200 cycles, you see this much larger drop off, 4% in just a 10 cycle period. Why is that happening? It just seems like battery degradation is a nonlinear process.
Yeah, it usually will. Big batteries or capacitor materials will usually degrade in a more gradual sort of a process. Even if it's fast, it won't be like good, terrible. Like it'll, even if it degrades, it'll be like, I'll drop off a cliff, or it'll be like slowly over time, and then maybe it'll kind of hit a little asymptote later, like after a while. But if you have like pretty good, then bleh, and it just dies, it probably means your material fell off. Like
Yeah.
You know, like if you have a film, this can happen, right? Like you have maybe, let's say you have like a graphite film on a substrate or something, and you're testing, all of a sudden you just get like no response, or it like dies, or it's really bad all of a sudden. It might have flaked off. Like this happens, right? You're cycling over and over again. You might have formed a bubble underneath that like delaminated part of it. It might have flaked off. It might have physically, something like that. That's my best guess. If you have a sudden sharp loss or decrease of stuff, probably it's a physical problem with your electrolyte. Which the good news of that possibly is that it doesn't mean your material's garbage. It just means that like you need to just work on the arts and crafts of your material, right? It's like it's a lot of times this is overlooked part of electrochemistry is the engineering of it. Is you have to get good at making films and making the setup and making the electrodes, and that can take practice. And so you might just need to look into that. That's my guess. If you have a sudden drop off like that, probably your material's lost. So try to look into that. You might have to watch it. Like it sucks to sit there for days staring at your electrode. But check that something physical didn't happen like that. That's my best guess. I think we have to leave it here. We're over time.
We're a little bit over time.
Sorry, everybody. There's a few questions. Ashraf, just as a general thing here, it looks like you're asking for some fundamental. We had like 30 minutes ago a nice
conversation.
Conversation and philosophy session about psychotherapy
about PhDs.
About PhDs and starting work as a researcher. So back up a little bit, and if you're watching this later, there'll be timestamps in some time about getting over some of those barriers of learning in electrochemistry. So we talked about that already. So hopefully that'll kind of preemptively be an answer to your question. But we're gonna have to leave it there for now. So apologies. Gulray's asked us a couple questions, but we are over time, so we'll have to call it there. So 100 episodes.
100 episodes. Yes. Still celebrating.
Still celebrating until it's all over to bring it home here. But anyway, that's gonna do it for us this week, everybody. We appreciate, as always, the questions and the engagement, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. So
all right.
Take care, everybody.